Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast. I'm Nick Harper from Washington, D.C., and these are the top headlines of the day. Russian President Vladimir Putin says that there are some positive shifts in talks between Russia and Ukraine 2 weeks into Moscow's military campaign in the country. President Joe Biden is likely to announce that along with the European Union and the G7, the United States will call to revoke Russia's most favoured nation trade status over its invasion of Ukraine. Russia is opening a criminal case against Meta for calling for the murder of Russians, saying Facebook and Instagram relaxed its rules on violent messages aimed at Russia's army and its leaders. The UN Food Agency warns that international food and feed prices could rise between 8 and 20% as a result of the conflict in Ukraine, triggering a jump in global malnourishment. Iran and world powers will pause talks aimed at reviving the 2015 nuclear deal. The European Union says it's a last-minute Russian demand, which threatens to torpedo the otherwise largely completed talks. People in Japan's northeast offer prayers and carry out searches for the missing, 11 years after an earthquake and tsunami left more than 18,000 people dead and triggered a devastating nuclear meltdown in Fukushima. The leaders of Europe have refused Ukraine's hopes of a rapid accession to the bloc, making the war-torn country a second-time loser after facing rejection from the NATO alliance just last week. Leaders of the European bloc members held a meeting for a second day in the city of Versailles, hoping to project an image of unity in the face of Russian aggression in Ukraine. The bloc was swift in imposing sanctions and offering political and humanitarian support to Ukraine, as well as some arms supplies. But cracks seem to be appearing in the bloc's united front, especially on Kyiv's demands for an accelerated membership to the club. The bloc's foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, has bashed the West for the mistakes with Russia and promises that were made to Ukraine. Borrell made the comments while speaking to a private broadcaster, saying, and I quote, "There are moments that we could have done better. There are things that we proposed and could not implement, such as the promise that Ukraine and Georgia would become part of NATO. I think it's a mistake to make promises you can't deliver." A key opponent to the bloc's enlargement is the Netherlands. The Dutch Prime Minister, Mark Rutte, said that there is no fast-track procedure to join the bloc, and Ukraine's request could take weeks, months, or even years to fulfil.
There is a request for candidate membership from Ukraine, and that is now in process, and we have fast-tracked the sending it on to the Commission earlier this week by the Council. There's one, but that will take time, months, maybe years before you get to anything.
The NATO chief, Jens Stoltenberg, has said that the Western alliance must not allow Russia's invasion of Ukraine to spill over into war between NATO and Moscow. He made the comments while responding to a question on whether there will be a no-fly zone over Ukraine. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said that the EU would deepen its partnership with Ukraine rather than speak of membership, which he said would require the unanimity of all 27 member countries. Europe fears that their standoff with Russia will only worsen in the coming years, and leaders sought to agree on how quickly they could reduce imports of Russian energy, on which the bloc is heavily dependent, as well as shore up their defence capabilities and stem the inflation of food prices. Well, our correspondent Ross Cullen has sent us this report from Paris.
There's no fast-track membership for now, but what has been approved by the European Union, they have agreed to fast-track Ukraine's membership request. So they will be working on that request from Kyiv to try to join the European Union, but there will be no sudden immediate entry into the European Union for Ukraine. European Union membership is a complicated process. It's a long process. The Dutch Prime Minister, who we heard in the introduction, did make a reference during this summit to the Western Balkans, countries like North Macedonia and Albania, which at times have been spending years just putting together their approval and their agreement internally within those countries, within Albania and North Macedonia, just to show that they could potentially reach candidate status to try to, at some point in the future, submit a membership request to the European Union. And then we have these fast-track requests from Georgia, from Moldova and from Ukraine as well. So it does seem to be there is agreement that there can be a fast-track membership request that will be worked on by Brussels, but there will be no fast-track membership, this immediate entry into the bloc.
US tech giant Facebook has joined the bandwagon to try and isolate Russia. Facebook has changed its policy on violent hate speech against Russian invaders. The statement follows a report which said that Facebook will not restrict calls for violence against Russians and Russian soldiers in selected countries. Facebook's parent company, Meta, said that political expressions that would normally violate the rules will be allowed, but the company said calls for violence against civilians will not be permitted. Reports also showed that Meta would allow support of the Ukrainian neo-Nazi group Azov Battalion in the context of the Ukrainian invasion. Azov Battalion was listed as a dangerous organisation by Facebook back in 2016. The ease in restrictions will be allowed mostly in ex-Soviet republics like Poland, Latvia, Romania, Slovakia, Ukraine and even Russia itself. But Facebook did not comment on the policy's geographic boundaries. In the meantime, Facebook has started to clamp down on Russian claims. Facebook took down the Russian post on a hospital bombing in Mariupol, which said the maternity ward was non-operational and was being used by the Ukrainian army. Twitter has also removed Russia's tweet, claiming the same. Ukraine's digital minister said that Kyiv is seeking support from around 50 tech firms in a bid to raise awareness against Russia's continued assault on Ukraine.
Well, I actually lost the count. So I think there so far it's just like a 50 plus companies, maybe even more. Mm-hmm. So we trying to raise awareness among like top platforms, of course, including what you said, and Netflix and Twitter and like even companies that provide infrastructure like Akamai, like different companies that Azure, Microsoft, Amazon, Etsy.
Well, Russia has already blocked Facebook and Twitter, but some tech giants, including Twitter, have launched a private protected site, which can be accessed through the dark web in Russia. Facebook has been accused of inciting violence in the past, including in Myanmar and Ethiopia. Well, as the war continues between Russia and Ukraine, China is considering buying or increasing its stake in Russian energy and commodity companies. The firms that are on China's radar, including gas giant Gazprom and aluminium producer Rusal International. The acquisitions or investments, if any, will be done by Chinese state-owned firms, including China National Petroleum, China Petrochemical and Aluminium Corporation of China and China Min Metals Corporation. All the firms are reportedly looking for opportunities for potential investments in Russian companies or in assets. China currently has some investments, mainly in Russia's energy sector. CNPC has a 20% stake in the Yamal NLG project and a 10% stake in Arctic NLG 2. While CNOOC also owns 10% of the Arctic. Analysts say that the exodus of Western companies from Russia has already left a business vacuum that could be filled by Chinese companies. Oil import-dependent China can take advantage of the oil, gas and metals projects that have been left behind by various companies in Russia after sanctions were imposed. China is intensifying its focus on energy and food security, and any deal would be strengthening China's efforts towards that. However, reports also say the discussions for any deal are at an early stage and won't necessarily lead to a result. Some talks between Chinese and Russian energy companies have already taken place, but investments by Chinese firms into Russian companies won't be without risks. The United States has already warned any Chinese companies breaching US export control measures can be shut down, but it's not clear if fresh investments into Russian firms come into this category. The former Soviet Union lifted the ban on Jews emigrating to Israel back in 1971, and since then there's been a steady stream of Jews from the former USSR and later from Russia. Many made a beeline for Israel to settle and to start a new life there. But Russia's invasion of Ukraine has divided the Russian-speaking Jewish community. It is a war which they don't want to pick sides in. But many who emigrated from the Soviet Union are being forced to.
Tens of thousands of Jews from the former Soviet Union began to pour into Israel from 1971. For the Russian-speaking Jews, Israel was a place of refuge. They wanted to start a new life in the Holy Lands, either for religious reasons or to escape the discrimination they faced in the erstwhile USSR. But Russia's invasion of Ukraine is now creating fissures among the Russian-speaking Jews in Israel. People have family on both sides of the border, and picking sides in this war is not an easy task.
In Israel, Russians and Ukrainians, or Jews who came from Russia and Ukraine are brothers. Okay, so we speak the same language. When I was a teenager and someone called me Russian, so I was like, I'm not Russian, I'm from the Ukraine. But it doesn't make a real difference. Okay, I'm actually speaking Russian. My culture is a Russian culture. But today these two countries are at war. And this kind of makes it all different. And we need to choose sides. So I'm from the Ukraine, but my brother is today living in Russia.
The NGO she runs expects a large influx of people from Ukraine. The State of Israel was established in the aftermath of the Second World War as the promised land for Jews who survived the Holocaust under the Nazi regime in Germany. Natan Sharansky was born in Ukraine in the erstwhile USSR, but immigrated and made his life in Israel, where he even served as a former minister. The Russia-Ukraine war is not specifically about Jews, but many Jews from Ukraine will be displaced.
Israel is a small country in the Middle East. I do believe that we have to make it clear that, let's say, we are going to have 30,000 refugees to whom we will give an opportunity for a few months, for half a year, for a year to live here to find their future. That we are ready to 1,000 of them to give maybe even citizenship. Definitely we have moral obligation. I am glad that Israel is now doing it.
Israel has a good working relationship with both Ukraine and Russia. It has sent 100 tons of humanitarian aid to Ukraine, but also relies on close coordination with Russia to carry out its operations in Syria. An estimated 200,000 Jews live in Ukraine, and Israel, as the promised homeland of the Jews, is expected to provide them with aid and refuge in their time of need. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Iran has said that the United States has made extra demands during negotiations on the nuclear deal. But the United States has accused Iran of trying to complicate efforts to restore the deal. This comes after there were concerns of fresh delays due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The Iranian foreign minister held a phone call with the EU foreign policy chief and said that there is no rational justification for some of the new demands made by the US, and it contradicts the country's position on reaching an agreement swiftly. Amir Abdollahian has not specified demands made by the US. However, he said that the United States cannot pass on a new and different message every single day. On Thursday, Iran's top security official tweeted that the Vienna negotiations are becoming more complicated every hour. He also said that the US is not interested in a strong deal that would satisfy both parties. Meanwhile, the US has reaffirmed its position that the deal could be reached in the coming days. The US State Department has said that it's down to a very small number of outstanding issues.
When it comes to Iran and negotiations in Vienna, you've heard us say that there has been significant progress. We remain close to a possible deal. It's really down to a very small number of outstanding issues. But the reason these particular issues are outstanding is because they are among the most difficult ones. I'm reminded of a former president who had a sign on his desk saying, hard things are hard. These are hard issues, and they're outstanding for that reason. Now is the time for all parties to show seriousness. We continue to believe that we can and should be able to reach a mutual return to compliance with the JCPOA in the coming days.
Chile's youngest ever new president is set to take the oath of office. The 36-year-old former student protest leader and lawmaker has pledged to rip up the country's conservative, market-oriented rulebook and push for a progressive social reform. And as per the latest, he's already begun working on his promises.
Gabriel Boric said he was going to do things differently as Chile's youngest ever president. A sign of that change, his presidential residence. The 36-year-old Boric will live in downtown Santiago instead of a wealthy eastern zone like his predecessors. Beatriz de Girolamo, who runs a bakery near Boric's new residence, says the president-to-be came in like an ordinary person.
He has gone to other businesses to say hello, the drugstore, the liquor store, and that gesture seems very nice to me because we are going to have a very humble, down-to-earth president and more connected to the streets, to the people, with Chile.
Boric is a former student protest leader heading up a broad leftist coalition. He's pledged to rip up Chile's conservative, market-oriented rulebook and push progressive reform. That includes strong support for LGBTQ groups, a focus on climate change, and Chile's first-ever majority female cabinet. His new home is a sign of change in the country, where anger has risen in recent years over inequality and an entrenched ruling elite.
I am happy he has chosen this neighborhood. There is still a lot of crime, but the fact he is coming, because he has not arrived yet, means there is a lot of police patrolling, so we feel calmer, safer.
Boric's team declined to comment on his choice of residence, but the message is clear. Making a break from past leaders, critics say, had become disconnected from the people.
K-pop sensation BTS has made a triumphant return to the stage in Seoul after 2019, playing their first of 3 shows at the Olympic Stadium in the South Korean capital. The country's battling a spike in COVID cases, so activities like singing, cheering and even standing were banned for the attendees. Instead, the fans were given paper clappers and glow sticks to show their delight. We leave you with these visuals. I'm Nick Harper in Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching.
This is right, Arab.